Wix Studio, the platform for agencies and enterprises to manage clients and projects with max efficiency, sharing Wix's SEO tech to help you drive growth.
Fix errors, waste, and issues in a couple of clicks. Get alerted whenever you're off track. Sign up at trueclicks.com.
Thank you. So I've been studying SGEs, search generative experiences, since they came out last year. This talk is slightly broader. This talk is about the future of the SERP, future of search engine results pages. Stat, who I'm representing here today, we're a rank tracking platform, so obviously this is particularly interesting to us. Spoilers, I'm going to say at the end of this talk that I expect maybe a less radical departure than some of you might currently be envisaging, but we'll get to that. Just in case you've been living under a rock for some time now, this is what Google launched last summer. This is what it looked like at the time, and this at the time was only for the US, only opt-in, only logged in, only in Chrome. They're now testing this live in some US SERPs and also some UK public SERPs. This is still only logged in, still only a test. Interestingly, these aren't official Google announcements. This has sort of come out in the weeds through journalists, which makes me think maybe it's happening in some other countries as well, that it hasn't come out. This is what it looks like now, so a bit different to what I showed you just a moment ago from last summer. A few things I want to draw your attention to in case you've not been looking at these or not played around with this yourself. This is all generative AI at the top of a search result. There's links included, so these are kind of like organic links to websites. Broadly, these are supposed to be the content that the snippet might be based on to a large degree. Then there's these questions at the bottom, which are very close, often identical to people also ask. But the main thing of note is this is big. This is a screenshot from my laptop, and you can see everything else is well below the fold. So this is obviously quite dramatic. So what we're going to talk about in the next 18 minutes. What is Google doing and why? How far they can take it without breaking other stuff, namely their business model. What happens next, and what I think you can take away from it. So, firstly, now this might be a controversial opinion for an SEO to hold, but I think if you imagine yourself as a user, not as an SEO for a second, there are probably quite a lot of queries where you would rather not see a website. So, for example, if you want to know what the weather is like, I mean, you don't need really a forecast to know what the weather is like, but it's going to be raining. But if you want to know what the weather is like, it is much easier to look at this than click through to a website, right? If you want to know what time it is in a different time zone, currency conversion, definitions, if you need to know the answer to it, need might be strong. If you want to know the answer to a simple question, Google in these cases cares about searcher experience. And I don't mean that they're like benevolent or altruistic or something like this. It is key to their business model for them to care about your experience, that the more things you use Google for, the more you're locked into their ecosystem. You know, all of these widgets I've just shown you, they're all loss leaders, right? It costs Google money to make those widgets. They are not monetized at all, but they are keeping you using Google for things where otherwise you might go elsewhere. And Google has more data on keeping people in their ecosystem and keeping you happy with the search result that you see than anyone else. In fact, arguably so much data on this that it might be problematic, depending if you ask the US Department of Justice. And they've been making changes, we know now, for years and years and years based on this kind of data. And they do this to maintain their position in the ecosystem. They do this to maintain their competitive advantage over other search engines and over less analogous competitors alike. Broadly, more users kept in their ecosystem, it's good for them, and it's actually good for us as well. You know, we tend in the SEO industry to see Google as a bit of a villain, perhaps rightly so, but they are the devil we know. And broadly speaking, we benefit from people using the devil we know. Even though in many cases, there might be better tools, like in a lot of those examples I just showed you, there might be better tools. I'm not suggesting that Google is the best weather app in existence. It's clearly not. but it is convenient when you're using Google anyway. And it's kind of the same in other examples. So on the left, I present to you, I'll try not to trip over the lectern. On the left, I present to you the delicatessen aisle in my local Tesco's. On the right, I present to you my local butcher's at Griffin's, home of the Newbury sausage. Now, the butcher is better. Unambiguously, it's just better. But I can't buy my fabric conditioner, my toothbrush, my tin of tomatoes at the butcher. So 9 times out of 10, I just get everything at the supermarket, right? And so it is with Google. This is the position they're in. They don't need to be the best app for everything, including AI-generated answers, for example. They just need to be good enough that we keep using them. So how far can they go down this road? How far can they actually bend the SERP within the ecosystem that they have? So I have some stats to share with you. Just briefly, I don't want to labor this, but this relatively small keyword corpus tracked in stat, somewhere in suburban US location. And I'm comparing July 2023, which is the earliest data that we collected on SGE, with February 2024, which is when I was putting this deck together. So this is data from last year. This is 2023. And you can see that at the time, and this is obviously in opt-in, logged in, Chrome, US, blah, blah, blah. About slightly more than half the time, I didn't see an SGE appearing. I just saw a generate button at the top of the SERP where I could choose to generate one myself. That is now shot up. So it's now very, very uncommon, even if you are opt-in and all the rest of it, for Google to default to showing you an SGE straight away. There might be reasons for that. So it could be, I'm sorry, I'm not waiting for photos because I've only got 13 minutes left, but it could be to save costs, right? The slides will be shared at the end. It could be to save costs. It could be because users were scrolling right past. It could be because the signals they were getting with people weren't happy with these. One way or another, they are not showing them by default so often. What about these links? So you might be tempted to think that these are kind of like organic, and maybe they are, and that maybe people click through from these to websites. But actually, these links have pretty little commonality with organic, and that's actually getting more divergent over time. So last year we saw 32% of cases where none of the links that were featured in the SGE were also in the top 10. That has now gone to 55%. So this is getting more divergent from organic, not less, over time. It is not the same as organic ranking. And interestingly, features that are in the SGE are often duplicated below. So this is places, or what you might call a local pack or a map pack. And in about 22% of SERPs, there was a map pack both in the SGE and beneath, which is obviously not a very clever user experience, not very Google-like. In fact, what we tend to see is that the SERP beneath the SGE is identical to what you would see on a logged out and therefore not SGE SERP. So basically, Google is just sticking the SGE on top of an existing SERP, no changes made beneath, no considerations made to how it affects the rest of the user experience. This still looks like a quick ship a test, get this out the door, not very thorough. Not much consideration. Monetization has changed a little bit. So this is one of the big things that I noticed last year was that SGE SERPs did not tend to be monetized. That's gone up. So we now see about half of SGE SERPs have some kind of monetization on them, but it's still not as much as you would expect to see on current normal SERPs. So for example, this is the same keyword. I think this is password manager or something. On the left, you see the traditional SERP where, above the fold, it's just ads. And on the right, you see above the fold, it's just SGE, and there might be some ads crammed beneath it, or perhaps not at all. In either case, you can sometimes see ads and then SGE as well. It's quite a clumsy visual picture. Anyway, this may or may not be shit, but it could still be where Google is going, right? So how far can they go? How far can they push it? There's 3 types of limit I want to talk about in terms of whether Google can actually do this and to what extent they can do this. So legal, UX, commercial. I'll talk about each briefly. Legal limitations. You may remember, if you're frankly not very old, the stir caused by feature snippets. In some countries, there was successful legal action taken against Google because feature snippets were plagiaristic or stealing traffic or stealing content, or however you want to look at it. Now, feature snippet is obviously, that's doing a fraction of what the SGE does. It keeps the content in the original author's words. It cites them directly. It provides a link through to their website. SGE often does none of these things, and yet, there was a lot of legal action. This was probably a bit of a Pyrrhic victory for publishers in many cases, but the point is that there was a legal angle here. I think SGE is highly vulnerable to this kind of attack. There's already this kind of conversation being had. And also often the sources that are cited are, Google Knowledge Graph provided information for this overview. I bet it did, but why have you said it 4 times? Okay. There's other potential legal issues, which I'm not going to go into because of time. If you ask Googlers themselves, they'll say that the big one, the reason why you don't see these in the EU anywhere at the moment is because of EU data centers. So they are planning to bring this to European markets. We'll see. But the other one, of course, that I'm not going to get into too much now is misleading information. That there's a lot of danger here around, and again, Google got a lot of bad press about this a few years ago, just before Medic, not by coincidence, around Google showing people wrong answers in SERPs. What about UX? Well, something I noticed is that the SGE is often kind of like a downgrade from an existing feature. So this is a search for Rings of Power cast. This show got critically panned, but I thought it was great. Anyway, on the left, you have a traditional result. On the right, you have the SGE version. They're basically doing the same thing, except the traditional one loads instantly, doesn't cost Google as much to generate, and contains more of the cast. The one on the right does have these little snippets, giving you a little bit of background on each, either actor or the part they're playing, although it's cut off at the bottom here. But further down, it says, regarding Elrond, a role previously played by Hugo Weaving in The Matrix. It's like, if Elrond was in The Matrix, I missed that part of the movie, and I regret doing so. Anyway, something you might also not have been keeping track of is Bing. About the same time as Google launched SGE last summer, actually a couple of months before, Bing launched an equivalent called Bing Stories. And you can see a screenshot from last summer on the left. And you can see that there's the AI-generated thing, like Google, just stuck on top of the rest of the results, pushing everything else down. If you look at Bing results today, look how far I had to scroll to get this into view. They have demoted this all the way down the SERP, and also they're not showing it as often as they were. So one way or another, Bing feels that this test of showing generative AI results very prominently was not a success. And that kind of makes sense to me. I think there are plenty of cases where generative AI is a great answer to a problem, but it certainly is not every single SERP. There's also this problem. SGEs currently are full of spam and misinformation. Whatever Google is currently doing with spam in their main algorithm, which you may or may not think is working, they are definitely doing less and worse with SGEs, which is kind of interesting, but I digress. Commercial limitations. So I've already talked a little bit about ads, and I think Google is reluctant to put ads into the SGEs themselves, probably some risks about misrepresenting their clients and this kind of thing. So they end up with this sort of clumsy experience where the ads are around the SGEs or just not at all. They've also, there may be totally different monetization options here. They've talked about making this a paid-only feature or one of their paid-only AI features. There's also various revenue sharing models that some people are talking about. I'm not sure how well this works for sort of 99% of users, to be honest. But this kind of experience where you have ads above an SGE and the SGE is just sort of gradually getting pushed down, this is sort of acknowledging some of what Bing has already acknowledged, right? That maybe this isn't the thing that should be right at the top. And like I shared earlier, with the default appearance being much less than it was last year, I suspect cost is a big part of this. The SGE is probably quite expensive on a per SERP basis, So maybe they don't want to do it by default all the time. Right, 5 minutes left. What happens next? Google has been slowly improving and expanding and more rolling out SGE broadly in its current form, broadly as it was last summer with some changes and tweaks. However, they also implied, I think this is from January, they also sort of loosely implied that SGE wasn't ever going to be rolled out fully in something like its current form. The quote here I've highlighted is, but our goal is to make AI helpful for everyone, not just early adopters, kind of implying that SGE was only for early adopters or something like this. So, I mean, you probably already got the picture from my tone. I don't think they should be rolling out SGE in its current form. I think it needs a lot of work. But maybe they're just about crazy enough. I'm not sure. I think it would be hugely damaging to their own business model for them to roll it out as it is now. I would strongly expect them to do something more gradual, more progressive, and just use the data that they've got from these experiments to inform to what extent they do that and what it looks like and this kind of thing. I think as SEOs, we kind of have to hedge our bets here. We kind of have to be ready for a situation where they do roll out, whilst also not putting all our eggs in that basket, because I think it will end up looking quite different. So some key takeaways that I think you can take either way with that in mind. One of the biggest things that strikes me is that the bar for sort of easy answers is getting harder and harder and harder. If you have a model, and like imagine a weather site a few years ago, if you have, probably 10 years ago or more, if you have a model which is based on answering a simple question in a reasonably low effort way, Google is coming for your lunch. That is going to get harder and harder and harder over time. If you just have relatively simple question and answer content. So I've feature snippets took some of this. These more complex knowledge graph results took some more of it. SGE will take even more. The bar for sort of how much effort it is worth having a page on your website for, it is going to get harsher and harsher over time. Looking at the bigger picture, yeah, like I keep saying, Google may make a fool of me. Google I/O is next month. They may do exactly the opposite to what I'm predicting. But I strongly think they will not roll out. They certainly should not roll out SGEs as they are right now. Some kind of improved, I would say probably softened version, perhaps. Maybe something more like an enhanced feature snippet. Maybe something more like what Bing is doing, which is a bit less intrusive. There are certain tactics that hold up either way. So you'll notice in some of my screenshots, SGEs often include local packs. They often include product feeds. Those kinds of ecosystem are going to stick around one way or another. And yeah, like I just said, the bar for content that's worthy of a click is going up over time. Lastly, if you're interested in any of the data I've shared here, or if you would like a free t-shirt, a bit like this hoodie, or if you would like to win a free pair of trainers, or if you would like an introductory offer to Stat, which is where most of this data come from, we have a booth downstairs. Come and say hi. We'd love to see you. Thank you.
Monthly reporting making you want to shove sharp things up your nose? Try Dragon Metrics, the all-in-one SEO software with mind-blowing reporting tools.
Demand sphere. Limitless visual insights from the SERPs. Unlimited dashboards and users. Easy to use and easy to scale your growth to new levels.